All right, let's plunge straight into this explainer because we are looking at a wild, high-stakes psychological experiment that basically stranded 100 people in the brutal wilderness. Just imagine taking people from completely different walks of life, dropping them in the middle of the freezing woods, and just watching how human nature unfolds when the elements turn against them.
Now, what rounds this whole crazy challenge is the prize pool, a whopping $250,000. But, there's a massive catch. That money is waiting to be divided only among the remaining members of the winning team at the very end. So the team with the most people left standing when help finally arrives takes it all. Which means every single person who quits leaves a larger share of the cash for everyone else. But it also physically weakens their team's overall number.
So here's the ultimate matchup. On the blue team, we've got 50 seasoned wilderness survival experts. These are hardcore individuals who literally forage and suffer in the woods for fun. Some of them have spent months at a time in the wild. And opposing them, the red team, 50 complete amateurs, just everyday people whose idea of elite survival gear is basically a 24-pack of bottled water and some store-bought lighters.
Which brings us to our first major phase of the experiment, shelter construction and comfort.
You'd naturally expect the experts to just completely dominate right out of the gate, right? Well, reality immediately flipped that assumption upside down. The blue team exhausted absolutely crucial calories building these intricate natural debris shelters. We're talking heavy, back-breaking labor to pile on foot-thick layers of leaves for insulation. But while they worked themselves to the bone, the red team simply leaned into a massive upfront advantage they were given, shopping at a normal store beforehand. They just popped up comfortable store-bought kids' tents and strung up tarps, expending almost zero physical energy.
And that energy conservation was crucial because the weather absolutely does not care about your resume. When we trace how this escalated, it gets grim fast. Day 1 introduced shockingly cold ground. Ironically, it was the experts who really struggled to sleep, and shockingly, 2 of them tapped out on the very first night. By day 5, constant rain started soaking everything. And then, day 8, a freezing rainstorm just hammered the camps. The brutal weather rapidly accelerated the suffering for everyone, but how each team absorbed that shock was night and day.
And that naturally leads right into the next phase, rationing and food crises.
Because, as you can guess, the real test wasn't just surviving a freezing rainstorm, it was handling a completely empty stomach. Food, or the lack of it, quickly became the central driving force of this whole thing. And the contrast here is just wild. The experts efficiently turned the forest into a grocery store. They foraged, built fishing traps out of sticks, located food caches, and set up strict community pantries to ration their meals. The red team? While they recklessly destroyed all their party snacks within the first 48 hours, they immediately faced starvation, literally forced to survive on a single apple a day per person.
But here is the kicker. Having food wasn't the saving grace you'd expect. There's an observation from the source that hits the nail on the head. You have 50 survivalists, aka control freaks, type A people all trying to be in charge. This right here exposes the blue team's fatal flaw. They had the survival skills, and they actually had the calories. But their egos, their incredibly rigid rules about rationing, and their constant need for control sparked massive, destructive infighting.
The experts basically started cannibalizing their own team dynamic. We're talking about individuals secretly stashing potatoes from their own teammates in their sheds. There were constantly heated arguments over who gets to dictate the daily portions. With so many self-proclaimed, naturally oppositionally defiant personalities clashing all at once, the camp just turned hostile. And the result? Mass self-eliminations. Not because they couldn't survive the wilderness, but simply because they couldn't survive each other's leadership styles in such a toxic environment.
But then, you flip over to the red team. Despite having virtually 0 calories and constantly complaining about wanting a Waffle House buffet, the amateurs managed to form a surprisingly tight-knit community. They actually bonded through sharing their incredibly minimal resources. They relied on shared misery, a kind of delusional positivity, and mutual support to endure the brutal physical toll of starvation.
All of this fragile group dynamic sets the stage perfectly for the 50-can standoff. The rules for this twist were beautifully simple, but honestly totally diabolical. Step 1. Both teams suddenly receive a sack of exactly 50 cans of food. Step 2. They have to survive for 72 hours with these cans just sitting in their possession. Step 3. The team that returns the most unopened cans wins a massive reward. But if there's a tie, nobody wins anything. It's a mechanism designed from the ground up to create intense paranoia and test their physical and mental discipline to the absolute breaking point.
So the burning question is, after 72 hours of agonizing hunger, severe sleep deprivation, and freezing rain, who finally caved and opened their cans?
Behind the scenes, both teams frantically hid their food deep in the woods. They suffer through the cold, constantly assuming that the other side was definitely breaking the rules in feasting. They starved themselves based purely on the assumption that they had to out-discipline the other team.
And the shocking result? 50. Yep, exactly 50. Out of pure stubbornness and competitive paranoia, both teams returned all 50 unopened cans. Not a single person on either side took a bite of that food.
And because it was a dead tie, neither team got the reward. It is peak dramatic irony. They willingly starved themselves for 3 full days, with food literally sitting right next to them, for absolutely nothing. It was a massive psychological gut punch. The sheer frustration of this result triggered immediate mass eliminations on both sides. We're talking angry participants instantly launching their flares into the sky just to go home.
And that massive fallout tees up our final phase perfectly. Ego versus teamwork.
That 50-can disaster absolutely broke the spirit of so many professionals. You really see it clearly during the Day 14 box reveal challenge. They were offered crucial survival items like fishing gear, cast iron pots, even chocolate. If both teams rejected an item, the next box was revealed. The first team to smash the button claimed the item, but if they took it, the other team got nothing. So what happened? Both teams passed over and over again. We watched the survival experts reject highly valuable tools out of sheer pride, while the amateurs passed simply to mirror their rivals' confidence and deny them a victory. It devolved into a pure battle of egos.
When you break down the traits of both groups side by side, it summarizes the entire sociological experiment flawlessly. The blue team's strategy was grounded entirely in wilderness skill and logic. Their downfall? Clashing egos and infighting, which led to a highly volatile morale. Then you look at the red team. Their strategy was basically a shared social burden. Their downfall was obviously a severe lack of actual survival skills, but their morale somehow remained delusionally positive. The experts had all the physical hardware needed to survive, but they completely lacked the social software. The amateurs, meanwhile, pushed through purely on communal support.
This whole dynamic is perfectly captured by the departure of Seth, one of the top survivalists on the blue team. When he left, he said, "I tried really hard to set everybody up for success. There's no joy in leaving." Even though he literally built the shelters with his own hands and taught his team how to actually endure the elements, he eventually had to tap out. The interpersonal environment and the constant, endless bickering just became way too draining for him to stick around. On the flip side, the ultimate takeaway here really boils down to one simple observation from the source material. The red team genuinely liked each other. When things got incredibly tough and their leaders or even their chef threw in the towel, the amateurs actually stepped up to fill those roles. They cooked, they managed the camp, and they did it simply because they actually cared about keeping their community intact. They had something to prove, together.
Which leaves us with a truly fascinating, kind of counterintuitive question to wrap up this explainer. If you were dropped into a high-stakes crisis tomorrow, would your specialized survival skills really be more valuable, or would it be your simple ability to just get along with others? It's a pretty profound question about human nature, and definitely something to ponder long after we're done here.